At 34,000 feet above the clouds, a small girl in a blue t-shirt slept with her cheek pressed against the cold airplane window, completely unaware that before this flight was over, hundreds of lives would depend on her. Her braid was slightly messy, one shoe half kicked off, tablet screen dark on the tray in front of her. To anyone walking past, she was just a tired 9-year-old traveling alone. No one on board could have guessed that the captain in the cockpit would soon be asking a question that would change everything. Is there any fighter pilot on this plane? Earlier that morning, the city had been just waking up. The soft pink light of sunrise spread over the terminal at the busy international airport. Inside, people rushed through security lines, dragging wheeled suitcases, clutching coffee cups, checking boarding passes. Among all these adults was one small figure moving with quiet confidence, almost invisible in the crowd. Her name was Lena Miller, 9 years old, wearing dark jeans, a bright blue shirt, and sneakers that lit up every time she took a step. A navy backpack with airplane patches hung on her shoulders. Lena waited at gate B-17 for her flight to the East Coast. To strangers, she looked like any other unaccompanied minor, small, polite, a little serious. But her backpack held more than just snacks and a stuffed toy. Inside was a tablet loaded with advanced flight simulator programs, a dog-eared book about famous pilots, and a treasured patch from her great-grandfather's old flight jacket. Her family had a rule: we don't brag. We train, we learn, and we stay humble. So Lena never told anyone that she could identify most aircraft by engine sound alone. A smiling gate agent knelt down, so she was at eye level with Lena. "Hi, sweetheart. Are you flying by yourself today?" "Yes, ma'am," Lena answered in a calm, clear voice. "I'm going to visit my grandpa. He's meeting me at the other airport." "How brave you are," the agent said kindly. "Have you flown alone before?" "This is my third time," Lena replied. There was no pride in her voice, just quiet fact. Growing up on air bases and near training fields, airplanes felt more familiar to her than playgrounds. While other children watched cartoons, she had watched takeoffs and landings, listened to briefings, and absorbed stories about discipline and courage. Her great-grandfather had flown in World War II. Her grandfather had flown jets during the Cold War. Her mother was a test pilot. Aviation was in her blood. Boarding started, and Lena joined the line. She held her boarding pass carefully with both hands the way her mother had taught her. The flight attendant at the door noticed the unaccompanied minor badge around her neck and gave her a gentle smile. "Don't worry, honey, we'll take good care of you. It's a smooth flight today." Lena simply nodded. She knew more about turbulence patterns and flight levels than the attendant could imagine, but she had also learned another important rule from her family. Adults don't like it when kids sound like instructors. So she just said, "Thank you," and walked onto the plane. Her seat was 16A, a window seat over the wing. She carefully placed her backpack under the seat in front of her, making sure the straps didn't block the aisle. She took out her tablet and her book, then buckled her seat belt snugly across her lap, checking it with the same firm tug her mother always used. The man in 16B gave her a quick glance and went back to his messages. The woman across the aisle smiled politely but didn't start a conversation. To them, Lena was just another child on a morning flight. The aircraft, a large twin-engine jet carrying nearly 300 passengers, filled quickly. Business travelers opened laptops, parents tried to manage restless toddlers, and older couples settled in with magazines. It felt like any normal day. The cabin lights were soft, the overhead bins were shut with a series of clicks, and the low hum of ventilation wrapped around everyone like white noise. Then the captain's voice came over the speakers, warm and professional. "Good morning, folks. This is Captain Harris from the flight deck. We're expecting a smooth climb and a cruise altitude of 38,000 feet. Flight time will be 4 hours and 20 minutes. Weather along the route looks excellent. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight." Most passengers barely listened. Lena, however, listened to every word, every pause, every tone. She had heard dozens of pilots speak like this. She could tell from his calm rhythm that Captain Harris was experienced. Her grandfather had once told her, "You can hear a pilot's soul in their voice." Lena smiled a little. This pilot sounded steady. That always made her feel safe. The jet pushed back from the gate and began to taxi. Lena watched through her window as ground vehicles moved with practiced choreography around them. She knew what most of them were for: fuel trucks, baggage loaders, tugs, and follow-me cars. She watched the flaps on the wing move during the control check and quietly repeated the steps in her head. The engines grew louder as they turned toward the runway. As the jet lined up, Lena felt that familiar thrill, the feeling just before tons of metal and fuel lift off the ground. The engines roared, pressing her back into her seat. She watched the runway markings blur past, counting in her head, guessing when they would reach takeoff speed. Then the nose of the plane lifted, the ground dropped away, and the city became a patchwork of tiny buildings below them. Clouds rose to meet them as the aircraft climbed into open sky. For the first hour, everything was peaceful. Lena opened what looked like a simple kid's puzzle game on her tablet. In reality, it was a custom flight simulator program her mother had helped her install, disguised so other people wouldn't ask too many questions. She practiced fuel calculations, navigation problems, and intercept scenarios, all hidden behind colorful shapes and friendly sounds. Around her, passengers watched movies, scrolled through social media, or closed their eyes to sleep. Flight attendants rolled carts down the aisles, offering drinks and snacks. When one reached row 16, she smiled at Lena. "What would you like, sweetheart?" "Apple juice, please," Lena said politely. "You're such a good little traveler," the woman replied, handing her the cup. Lena thanked her again, then looked out the window. The world below was a white blanket of clouds, with only small breaks revealing glimpses of mountains and rivers. The sky above was deep blue, peaceful and endless. The gentle vibration of the engines and the steady hum of the air system worked like a lullaby. After finishing her juice, Lena set her tablet aside, pulled her backpack a little closer, and let her eyes close. She drifted into sleep with the faint smile of someone dreaming of altitude and clear skies. In her dreams, she wasn't a small girl on a commercial flight. She was in a sleek jet, helmet on, hands steady on the controls, flying in perfect formation with her mother and grandfather. In the dream, there was no fear, only precision and freedom. Back in the real cabin, the seatbelt sign stayed off, and the crew moved calmly. People adjusted their seats, whispered to each other, or put on headphones. Everything about the flight seemed normal. No one noticed that outside, high over the curved horizon, something else was moving, small, fast shapes far beyond the sight of sleepy passengers. For now, Lena slept on, unaware that the sky around them was slowly beginning to change, and that her quiet training and strange childhood would very soon be tested in a way no one could have imagined. Lena didn't know how long she had been asleep when the faintest change in the engine tone stirred her awake. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, just a subtle shift, the kind that only someone trained to listen would ever notice. Her eyes opened instantly. Her grandfather always said, "A good pilot wakes up before danger announces itself." Lena pushed her hair back, straightened in her seat, and pressed her forehead lightly to the window. Outside, the sky looked peaceful at first, soft clouds stretching endlessly below, sunlight glinting off the wing. But as her eyes adjusted, Lena felt her heartbeat change. Something was wrong. She checked the angle of the wing tips, the light, the direction of the shadows. She glanced at the digital clock on her screen and quickly calculated how far the aircraft should have traveled. Her mental math told her immediately they weren't where they should be. She blinked, leaned closer, and scanned the horizon. For a moment, she thought she imagined it. A glimmer, a flicker of reflected sunlight. But then she saw it clearly, a gray shape slicing through the sky several miles away. Sleek, fast, predatory. Her breath caught in her throat. It was a fighter jet. Lena's heart thudded. She recognized the silhouette instantly, just like she had recognized aircraft since she was a toddler sitting on hangar floors. The distinctive twin-engine layout, the wing tilt, the nose shape, it wasn't American. It wasn't friendly, and it wasn't alone. She pressed her hand to the glass, eyes widening as two more shapes emerged from the clouds. One at their 3 o'clock, one at their 9, and one trailing slightly above them in a high-cover position. A tactical spread. Not escort. Not training. Intercept. Lena swallowed hard. Her pulse began to race, but her mind stayed razor-sharp, the way her mother trained her during countless simulator sessions. She remembered her grandfather's voice. Fear is normal. Panic is optional. She inhaled slowly. The cabin around her remained calm, passengers stretching, adjusting headphones, flipping pages in magazines. No one else saw the danger circling them like wolves. The seatbelt sign dinged overhead. A tiny sound, but Lena froze. The captain's voice followed a second later, steady but too tight, too forced. Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing a minor technical issue with our navigation system. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. Flight attendants, please be seated immediately. Lena knew that tone. It wasn't technical issue. It was fear under pressure. She had heard similar tones during her mother's debrief recordings after difficult missions. She had heard it in her grandfather's voice when he talked about combat. Pilots trained to sound calm even when their world was falling apart. But a child raised among fighter pilots could hear the truth. Lena's fingers tightened around the armrest. The man beside her noticed the way she stared out the window. "What's wrong, kid?" he asked, amused. "There are fighter jets out there," Lena whispered. He chuckled. "Sure, kid. And I'm the King of England. Relax. You're dreaming." But Lena didn't blink. She didn't look away. She watched the jet at their 3 o'clock position shift slightly closer, too close, and she knew the pilot was trying to intimidate them. Her stomach twisted, but her mind worked faster. If they had entered U.S. airspace unnoticed, something serious was happening. The possibilities were limited and none of them good. She unbuckled her seatbelt. The man beside her frowned. Hey, where are you going?" "Seatbelt sign is on." "I need to talk to the captain," she said quietly. "What?" "Absolutely not." His hand reached to block her. Lena lifted her chin. "Sir, this is important." "Kid, sit down. This is grown-up business." She slipped past him before he could grab her again, stepping into the aisle just as a flight attendant hurried past with a pale face and trembling hands. The woman stopped when she saw Lena out of her seat. "Sweetheart, you can't be up right now. It's not safe." "I need to speak with the captain," Lena said with that strange calmness her family had drilled into her. "It's urgent." "Honey, this isn't." "I know about the jets," Lena said, quietly but clearly. 3 fighter aircraft. 1 at our 3 o'clock. 1 at 9. 1 above us. They're not friendly. And they're forcing us off course. The flight attendant froze, eyes going wide. For a moment, she simply stared at the small girl with the steady voice. How do you know that?" "My mother flies jets. My grandfather commanded fighter wings. I've trained in simulation since I was little." Lena's voice didn't shake. "The captain needs help." "I can help." The flight attendant's world tilted for a moment. She knew the pilots were terrified in the cockpit. She knew they were being forced away from their planned route. And she had just heard a 9-year-old calmly identify the exact threat outside the window. She made a decision. "Come with me," she whispered. Passengers turned their heads as the small girl walked behind the flight attendant, their faces puzzled, unaware that a child was about to step into the place where all hope had collapsed minutes earlier. The attendant knocked on the cockpit door with the emergency code. The lock clicked. A narrow opening appeared, revealing the pale, sweating face of the co-pilot. "What is it?" he asked urgently. The attendant took a breath. "She says she has fighter pilot training." There was silence. Then the co-pilot swallowed. "Send her in." The door opened wider. Lena stepped into the cockpit, the place she had dreamed of her whole life, though never like this. The air was hot, tense, electric with fear. Alarms blinked silently on the panels. Through the windshield, she saw the fighter jets clearly now, sharp shapes streaking through the sky like metallic predators. Captain Harris turned, hope flickering, then dying, when he saw her. "What is this?" "I asked for a fighter pilot, not a child." Lena lifted her chin. "Sir, my name is Lena Grace Miller. My family has trained fighter pilots for 3 generations. I know exactly what those jets are and what they're doing." The captain's eyes widened slightly, disbelief warring with desperation. The radio crackled sharply with a cold, accented voice. "American aircraft, maintain heading 280. Do not deviate. If you change course, you will be destroyed." The captain's hand shook. Lena stepped closer, her voice firm and steady in the middle of chaos. "Captain, please let me help." In that moment, when a child stood in a cockpit surrounded by hostile jets, everything changed. For a moment, the cockpit felt frozen in time. Just the soft hum of the engines, the quiet beeping of warning lights, and the cold voice of the hostile pilot fading into static. Captain Harris stared at Lena, torn between disbelief and desperation. The co-pilot wiped sweat from his forehead, knuckles white on the controls. Outside, the fighter jets kept their tight, threatening formation around the passenger plane. They were not escorting. They were corralling. Lena took one small step forward, her eyes fixed on the instrument panel. Her voice was steady, almost unnaturally calm for a child. "Captain, those jets aren't showing bluff behavior. They're flying a coordinated intercept pattern. They're armed, and they're forcing you toward the northwest." Captain Harris swallowed. "We know. Navigation's been compromised. Communications, mostly jammed." His voice cracked slightly. "Who are you?" Lena lifted her chin. "My mother flies experimental fighters. My grandfather trained pilots for decades. I've spent more time in tactical simulators than most cadets." She pointed at the radar. "Look, your course drift started 19 minutes ago. They're forcing you into a trap. You need help talking to military channels." The co-pilot blinked. "You're 9. "Yes, sir," Lena said simply. "But I know what I'm looking at." Another sharp burst of static cut through the cockpit. The hostile pilot barked again. "Maintain heading. Descend to flight level 270 immediately." The plane shuddered lightly as Captain Harris adjusted. Under threat, a civilian aircraft had no choice. Lena pressed closer to the radio panel. She wasn't tall enough to see everything, but she didn't need to. She recognized the layout instantly from simulators her grandfather had shown her. "Captain, the jamming isn't full spectrum. They're blocking your primary channels, not the emergency ones. If we modulate through a secondary military band." The co-pilot said, eyebrows shooting up. "Yes, sir." Lena pointed to a small dial most civilian pilots never touched. "If we shift the transponder to emergency mode and pulse at a specific frequency, we might break through the interference." Captain Harris stared at her. He didn't want to believe a child could know this. But the truth was in her eyes, sharp, precise, trained. And they had no other hope. "What frequency?" he asked. Lena didn't hesitate. 303.8. "My grandfather used it during an emergency training drill. It sometimes cuts through hostile jamming." The co-pilot blinked. That's a restricted band." Lena's voice softened. "It's our only chance." Captain Harris looked at his co-pilot. The older man finally nodded. "At this point, we try anything." Very carefully, Lena climbed onto the jump seat behind them. Her small hand hovered over the controls, waiting for the captain's signal. He nodded once. Lena's fingers moved in quick, practiced motions, adjusting the transponder, tuning the secondary radio, aligning the modulation. Her hands shook slightly, but her focus never broke. She keyed the mic. "Emergency transmission. This is civilian flight." She paused, glancing at the captain. "Flight 298, he whispered. "This is Flight 298 declaring Mayday," Lena continued. "We are being intercepted by 3 armed aircraft. Coordinates." She read them directly off the panel with perfect accuracy. "Requesting immediate military assistance." This is not a drill. For 6 long seconds, nothing answered. The co-pilot's voice cracked. "It's not working." Then, suddenly, a new voice burst through the static. Clear. Strong. American. "Flight 298. This is Falcon Command on guard frequency. We read you." "Repeat. We read you." "Who is transmitting?" "Identify." Lena took a breath. "This is Lena Miller, civilian passenger. I'm 9 years old. But I know what's happening outside this aircraft." There was a stunned pause on the other end. Then, "Lena, did you say Lena Miller?" "Yes, sir." "Are you related to Commander Elaine Miller?" "She's my mother." The voice came alive with urgency. "Copy that. Stay calm. Lena, we've been trying to reach your flight for 12 minutes. You broke through the jamming. We're scrambling jets now, ETA 8 minutes." The captain let out a shaky breath, eyes shining with something between hope and disbelief. You did it," he whispered. But Lena didn't celebrate. She leaned forward, watching the hostile jets through the windshield. "Captain, they won't wait 8 minutes. They're tightening formation." Indeed, the fighter at their right flank drifted slightly closer, its nose angled in a warning position. The one at the left shifted to mirror it, like jaws closing around them. Lena spoke again into the radio. "Falcon Command, the interceptors are becoming aggressive." "Understood, Lena," the commander replied. "Listen carefully. We need continuous updates until our fighters reach you." "Can you do that?" Lena sat up straighter. "Yes, sir." "Good. You're doing incredibly well. Stay with me. Tell me the configuration of the lead aircraft." Lena's mind shifted into analysis mode. She pressed to the windshield, eyes sharp. "Single seat. Extended fuel tanks. Full missile load visible on wings. Pattern suggests highly trained pilot. The commander sounded impressed. Copy. And the others? The left interceptor is steady but delayed in movements. Possibly newer or less confident. The right one is slightly out of sync, maybe a mercenary pilot. Captain Harris stared at her as if she were speaking another language. How can you possibly know all that from here? Lena didn't take her eyes off the jets. My grandfather drilled me every weekend. Aircraft behavior tells you more than paint markings. Suddenly the radio crackled again, this time with the distressed, accented voice of one of the hostile pilots. American aircraft, you are too slow. Comply now, or we take action. Captain Harris's hands trembled. What do we do? Lena grabbed the back of his seat. Listen, you obey, slowly. Delay each instruction just a little. Not enough for them to notice. Just enough to buy time. The captain hesitated. You're sure? Yes, she said firmly. Every second matters. He nodded. The plane began descending, but slower than before. Changing headings, but with subtle delays. Just enough to stretch time. Just enough to protect hundreds of lives. The commander's voice returned through the radio. Lena, our jets are almost airborne. Just hold on. But Lena wasn't listening anymore. Her eyes were locked on the sky beyond the cockpit. Because in the far distance, faint but growing, she saw shapes cutting through the clouds. American fighters. Hope was coming. But danger was still closing in. The next few minutes stretched like hours inside the cockpit. The passenger jet continued its forced descent, slow and deliberate, buying precious seconds while the hostile fighters circled closer. Captain Harris followed Lena's instructions with trembling precision, delaying each command just enough to avoid suspicion. Every movement mattered. Every second counted. Lena kept her eyes locked on the sky ahead. Her pulse thudded in her ears, but her mind stayed focused, sharper than ever. She remembered her grandfather's words during simulator drills. When danger comes, breathe. Think. Act. She forced herself to breathe slowly, matching the rhythm of the engine's hum. The radio crackled. The commander's voice returned, steady, controlled, reassuring. Lena, Falcon Command again. Our jets are airborne and closing fast. 5 minutes out. We need continuous visuals. Tell us everything you see. Yes, sir, Lena answered without hesitation. She pressed closer to the windshield. The sun glared off the metal bodies of the hostile jets, but she studied every detail. Falcon Command, the lead fighter is still above us, maintaining high cover. That pilot is experienced. He hasn't made a single unnecessary movement. And the others? The commander asked. The left interceptor is adjusting position more often now, Lena said. He's nervous. His flight path wobbles between correction points. He's not expecting resistance. Captain Harris shot her a look of astonished respect. How can you read that from here? Lena spoke without turning. Formation behavior tells you everything. My mother made me analyze hundreds of flight recordings. The commander replied, Copy, Lena. That's extremely useful intel. You're doing great. The aircraft jerked slightly as the right-hand fighter shifted dangerously close, its wings tilting in a silent threat. The pilot wanted to intimidate them, remind them who had control. A sharp warning tone sounded on the panel. The co-pilot swallowed. They're scanning us with a targeting radar. Lena felt her stomach twist, but she kept her voice steady. They won't fire. Not at this altitude. Too close to U.S. territory. They're trying to scare you into obeying. Captain Harris exhaled shakily. Well, it's working. Outside the cockpit, the cabin had begun to descend into quiet panic. From behind the locked door, Lena heard muffled crying, whispered prayers, frightened murmurs. Flight attendants remained strapped in their seats, pale-faced, gripping armrests while pretending everything was under control. The passengers didn't know the specifics, but they could feel it in the air. Something was terribly wrong. Suddenly, the radio burst again, not Falcon Command, but the hostile pilot. American aircraft. Your response is too slow. Descend faster or we take action. Captain Harris's hand hovered over the throttle. If I slow any more, they'll know. Lena grabbed his arm gently but firmly. Cut the rate by only 2%. Small enough to hide. Enough to gain 10 more seconds. The captain nodded and made the adjustment. Lena turned back to the sky. Her eyes sharpened. Falcon Command. Update. Hostile jets tightening formation. They're preparing for forced diversion. They want to trap us before your fighters arrive. Understood, the commander said. Help is almost there. How far? Lena asked. 3 minutes. 3 minutes felt like a lifetime with 3 armed aircraft circling them like predators. The hostile jet on the left suddenly dipped, drifting dangerously close to the passenger plane's wingtip. Captain Harris stiffened. He's hurting us. Lena cut in. Yes. They want you scared enough to descend faster. Don't let them. The hostile pilot barked another warning in broken English. American aircraft. Immediate compliance. You endanger everyone on board. Captain Harris froze. I need to respond. No, Lena said quickly. They expect fear in your voice. It gives them control. Stay silent. The co-pilot looked at her, stunned. How do you know this? Because, Lena said softly, my grandfather taught me never to give the enemy your fear. Just then, the radar display beeped rapidly. New contacts appeared, small blips approaching with incredible speed from the southeast. The co-pilot gasped. Multiple aircraft. High velocity. Lena leaned in, her heart hammering. She recognized the pattern instantly. Falcon Command, she said, her voice cracking with relief. I see your fighters. The commander's voice brightened. Affirmative, Lena. They're with you. Hold tight. Through the cockpit glass, 4 gray shapes emerged from the distant clouds. Fast, powerful, unmistakably American. They streaked forward, closing the distance in seconds, slicing through the sky like arrows. The F-15s had arrived, but the hostile jets noticed them too. The lead interceptor suddenly banked right, climbing aggressively. The left fighter swerved out of formation. The right one dropped altitude rapidly. Panic. They were running. Captain Harris gasped. They're scattering. Lena held the radio. Falcon Command. Hostiles breaking formation. The commander responded. Eagle Squadron has visual contact. Engagement protocol in progress. The cockpit shook violently as one F-15 streaked past them in a high-speed pass, performing a deliberate intimidation maneuver. Loud, powerful, absolute. The passengers screamed behind them. The co-pilot grabbed the controls. But Lena smiled just a little. They did that on purpose. To warn the hostile jets they're outmatched. In seconds, the sky became a choreography of power. 2 F-15s broke toward the fleeing interceptors. Another F-15 slid directly in front of the passenger jet, a protective shield. The last drifted to their right wing with a graceful, confident movement. Then a voice came through the radio, deep, calm, unmistakably American. Flight 298, this is Eagle 1. You're safe. Stay on current heading. Do not change altitude. We have control of the situation. Captain Harris sagged in relief, eyes watering. Copy. Eagle 1. Eagle 1 continued. You handled yourselves well. And Captain, his voice softened. We understand you had unexpected help. Lena felt heat rise in her cheeks. The radio clicked. Lena Miller. Eagle 1 said, voice filled with warmth and awe. Your grandfather hears you. He asked me to tell you something. Lena froze. My grandfather? She whispered. Yes. He says, Little Eagle, you did exactly what you were trained to do. I'm proud of you. Lena's breath hitched. Tears filled her eyes, finally breaking through the calm she had fought to maintain. She squeezed her hands into fists, trying to stay composed. Behind them, the cabin remained unaware of the emotional storm in the cockpit. But the danger wasn't fully gone yet. Because even though the hostile jets were retreating, one of them wasn't leaving quietly. For a brief moment, the cockpit felt lighter, hopeful even. The American F-15s cut through the sky with absolute dominance, and the hostile jets scattered like startled birds. Captain Harris allowed himself a shaky breath of relief, one hand covering his eyes as the weight of the last 20 minutes finally pressed down on him. The co-pilot sagged back in his seat, whispering, Thank God, thank God. But Lena didn't relax. Her eyes remained fixed on the horizon, scanning every angle, every shadow, every glint of light. Her instincts, sharpened by years of listening to fighter pilots talk about the second danger, told her it wasn't over. Her instincts were right. From the top left corner of her window, Lena caught a sharp movement, a streak of gray metal dropping fast. Her breath hitched. Captain, look. The cockpit went silent as the last hostile jet, the most skilled one, the leader, came diving back toward them at high speed. It wasn't fleeing. It was repositioning. Eagle 1's voice boomed over the radio. Flight 298, hold steady. We still have a bogey attempting aggression." The lead hostile pilot cut through the sky with unbelievable precision, circling once above them like a predator considering its final strike. He had something to prove. Maybe he wanted a show of dominance. Maybe he wanted to distract the American fighters. Lena gripped the back of the captain's seat. He's not retreating. He's challenging them. Captain Harris gasped as the hostile jet shot downward toward the passenger plane, passing dangerously close, so close the Boeing trembled under the shockwave. Screams erupted from the cabin behind the door. Glasses rattled. A storage latch popped open in the galley. The co-pilot swore under his breath. "He's trying to force us into evasive action. But if we move," Lena finished for him, "we break formation with the F-15s. That's exactly what he wants." The hostile jet flew past, climbed sharply, then swung around again, nose pointed downward in another threatening dive. A taunt. A dare. Falcon Command came through the radio. "Eagle Squadron, engage with caution. Do not fire unless the hostile attempts to damage the civilian aircraft." Lena pressed closer to the window, analyzing every tiny detail. "Falcon Command, the hostile is flying aggressively, but he's holding position at the last second. He's not planning to fire. He's trying to provoke." The commander responded, "Copy. We need to control the situation without escalation." Suddenly, the lead hostile fired a harmless but terrifying warning flare, streaking bright orange past the cockpit glass. The entire Boeing shook from the proximity. Passengers screamed. Someone shouted. A baby wailed. Flight attendants yelled for everyone to stay seated. The cockpit lights flickered from the sudden flash. Captain Harris tensed. "If he fires a second one." "He won't," Lena said, though her voice trembled slightly. "He's bluffing. He's trying to make your escort break formation, not hit us." And then, without warning, the hostile pilot dove low, passing beneath the Boeing and shooting upward on the other side, looping over the wing like a hawk showing off its claws. Eagle 2, one of the American F-15 pilots, came over the radio. "Hostile aircraft, break off immediately. You are endangering a civilian flight. This is your final warning." The hostile did not respond. Instead, he rolled his aircraft onto its side and performed a slow, taunting pass directly across the nose of the Boeing, an act of pure arrogance, meant to humiliate and intimidate. Lena clenched her fists. He's mocking the F-15s. He thinks they won't engage because we're in the way. "He's right," the co-pilot whispered. "They can't fire. Not with us here." But Lena wasn't watching the hostile jet now. She switched her focus to the American fighters, their angles, their spacing, their trajectories. Something sparked in her memory, one of her mother's lessons. If the enemy tries to provoke your formation, don't react emotionally. React tactically. Lena grabbed the mic. "Falcon Command, this is Lena. The hostile is flying in a predictable intimidation loop. Eagle 1 needs to climb 10 degrees. Eagle 2 shift left. Eagle 3 take low right cover. He's flying into a trap without realizing it." There was a long silence. Then the commander said, "Eagle Squadron, adjust per the Miller child's analysis." The fighters moved instantly, trusting the voice that had already saved the day. The hostile pilot swooped in again. Same move, same angle. But this time, the American fighters had repositioned. As he finished his taunting loop, Eagle 3 rose from below with a sudden burst of speed, slicing directly into the hostile's path, not to fire, but to block. The hostile jerked his aircraft violently in surprise. Eagle 1's voice thundered. "Hostile aircraft, you are now locked. Any further aggression will be treated as an attack." Lena inhaled sharply. She could almost feel the pilot's fear from inside their cabin. The hostile jet stalled for half a second, hesitating, then suddenly tilted away, engines roaring as it abandoned the dive. The pilot wasn't brave anymore. He was outmatched. He fled, straight south. Eagle 2 and Eagle 3 followed, herding him out of U.S. airspace like trained guardians. Eagle 1 remained with Flight 298, flying alongside the wing in a stable protective glide. The cockpit filled with a stillness so heavy it made Lena's hands tremble. Captain Harris collapsed back in his seat. The co-pilot covered his face. Lena let out a long, shaky breath. Eagle 1's voice softened. "Flight 298, you are fully secure. Returning you to your original course." Then the voice changed tone, gentler, warmer. "Lena Miller, your mother is on the line. She's listening. Lena's eyes filled instantly. Mom. A new voice, breathless, emotional, came through. Baby, you were so brave. I'm here. I'm right here. Lena's tears fell silently as the sky finally cleared around them and the last threat disappeared beyond the clouds. For several long seconds, Lena couldn't speak. The cockpit, once filled with fear, warnings, and hostile voices, felt strangely quiet now, almost peaceful. Outside the windshield, the sky stretched wide and blue, broken only by the steady, comforting presence of Eagle One flying protectively beside them. The danger had passed, but the weight of everything she had done pressed suddenly into her small shoulders. The radio crackled softly. Lena, sweetheart, are you there? Her mother repeated, her voice trembling with worry and pride. Lena wiped her eyes quickly with the back of her hand. I'm here, Mom, she whispered, her voice cracking. Oh, thank God. Her mother exhaled, and even through the static, Lena could hear her relief pouring out like a flood. I'm so proud of you. You stayed calm. You remembered your training. You saved all those people. For the first time since she stepped into the cockpit, Lena let herself feel the fear she had held back. Her small hands shook in her lap. Mom, I was so scared. I know, baby, her mother said softly, voice thick with emotion. Real courage is doing the right thing while you're scared. And you were braver today than most pilots ever have to be. Captain Harris turned slightly in his seat, eyes glistening. Your mother is right, Lena. You saved our flight. You saved us all. The co-pilot nodded vigorously, unable to fully express the R written all over his face. Lena sniffed and tried to sit up straighter. She didn't want to cry in front of them. Her grandfather always said, pilots can cry, just not until the mission is over. And now, finally, the mission was over. The commander's voice returned to the radio, firm but warm. Flight 298, you are cleared to resume your previous route. We've coordinated with air traffic control. You're safe, and we'll escort you all the way to your destination. Captain Harris took a shaky breath. Copy, Falcon Command. Resuming original heading. He reached forward, adjusting the controls with steadier hands. The aircraft leveled out smoothly, climbing back toward 38,000 feet. The passengers in the cabin felt the shift, sensing the danger had eased, even if they didn't understand what had truly happened. As the jet settled into stable cruise, Eagle One remained beside their wingtip, a silent guardian, close enough that Lena could see the pilot through the tinted canopy. He lifted one gloved hand in a steady, respectful salute. Lena blinked in surprise. Then, remembering what her grandfather taught her, she lifted her small hand to her forehead and returned the salute. Her fingers trembled slightly, but her posture was perfect. The F-15 pilot dipped his aircraft's wing in acknowledgement, a graceful, almost ceremonial gesture. Captain Harris let out a soft, choked laugh. He saluted you. The co-pilot added, I've flown 20 years and never seen anything like this. Lena blushed, staring down at her hands. I just did what I had to. The radio clicked again. Lena, the commander said gently, we're patched in with someone else who wants to speak with you. Lena straightened. Who? There was a pause, then a deep, steady voice, strong, proud, unmistakable, filled the cockpit. Little Eagle. Lena gasped. Grandpa. Yes, sweetheart, General Miller replied, sounding choked with emotion. I heard everything. I monitored the entire situation from base. You were extraordinary. You stayed calm. You used your training. You saved hundreds of lives. Grandpa, I was scared, Lena whispered. He laughed gently. You think I wasn't scared when I flew combat missions? Courage isn't about not feeling fear. It's doing what you did today anyway. You're a true Miller. And one day, if you still want to, you'll be a fighter pilot for real. A tear slid down Lena's cheek. I want to more than anything. I know, her grandfather said. Today proved what's in your heart. Captain Harris wiped a tear from his eye. The co-pilot looked away, pretending something had gotten into his. The moment felt sacred, 2 generations of pilots speaking to a third who had just proven herself in the sky. A soft knock sounded at the cockpit door. Captain Harris opened it a crack. One of the flight attendants peeked in, eyes wide with awe. Is everything safe now? Yes, Harris said, glancing proudly at Lena. Thanks to her. The attendant's eyes filled instantly with tears. We owe you our lives. Behind her, Passengers craned their necks down the aisle, whispering anxiously. Is the danger over? Did something happen? What was that jet outside? Who's that girl? The captain cleared his throat and pressed the PA button. Ladies and gentlemen, your flight is completely safe now. Earlier, we had an unexpected situation, but thanks to the remarkable actions of one of our youngest passengers, we are secure and escorted by the United States Air Force. The cabin erupted into confused murmurs. The captain added, voice thick with emotion, we owe our safety to a 9-year-old girl. Gasps. Whispers. A stunned silence. The attendant gestured gently toward Lena. Honey, the passengers want to thank you. Lena hesitated. She looked up at the captain. Can I go back to my seat? Captain Harris smiled warmly. Of course. You've done more than enough. He unbuckled her, helped her down from the jump seat, and gave her a soft pat on the shoulder. You're extraordinary, Lena. The cockpit door opened fully, and Lena stepped back into the aisle. The entire row of passengers near the front stared at her, eyes wide, mouths open. Then word traveled like ripples in water. Heads turned. People rose from their seats. By the time Lena reached row 16, the entire cabin was watching her. And then, something beautiful happened. It started with a single pair of hands clapping. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, the entire airplane burst into applause. Loud, emotional, overwhelming. People stood. Some cried. Some placed hands over their hearts. A few bowed their heads in gratitude. Lena froze in the aisle, cheeks burning, overwhelmed. She wasn't used to this. Her family taught her to do the right thing quietly. A woman leaned across the aisle and whispered, Thank you, sweetheart. You saved my children. A businessman in the next row nodded at her. You're braver than any of us. Someone farther back said, She's a hero. Lena's vision blurred again, but this time, the tears were warm, soft, and full of something she rarely felt so strongly. Pride. True pride. She slipped back into her seat, heart still pounding, overwhelmed by the attention. The flight attendants brought her a blanket, juice, and cookies she hadn't even asked for. A man in the row behind whispered, We're lucky you were here today. Lena simply nodded, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. She finally allowed herself to breathe long and deep, feeling the weight of fear melt away. Outside her window, Eagle One still flew beside them, silent and steady. A guardian. A witness. A salute returned. As the sun dipped lower on the horizon and the plane continued toward its destination, Lena closed her eyes, not in fear this time, but in quiet triumph. She had proven something to the sky, to the world, and maybe even to herself. She wasn't just a little girl who loved airplanes. She was a Miller. She was a fighter in spirit. And someday soon, she would fly on her own wings.